Hello, I'm kind of fat. You ever just sit back and realize that there are multiple movements and discussions about the validity of your personhood, but it's not even something interesting or familiar like good old-fashioned racism or misogyny? The very fact that my very body, not referring to its structure or my body type, just the very fact that I'm a little chubbier than what my petite frame permits, the very fact of that is politicized. It's peculiar to say the least. And it fills me with so much trepidation. And I was kidding, obviously, about my intro. I'm not even mid-size. These debates aren't about people like me most of the time. It's about you fat asses. It's about people with larger bodies than myself. But why are larger bodies politicized? There's always been a certain amount of social pressure to be on the skinnier side in the last 50 years or so. There's always been a certain amount of shaming of people who are larger, and neither of those things were ever correct. But in the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years, there's been an extreme amount of politicization of fat people, most of which has something to do with one of these movements: body positivity, body neutrality, fat acceptance. And while it's not really a movement, it's a cultural phenomenon: gym bros. And today we're going to explore all of these movements, where they come from, how they intertwine with one another, why they exist, why they're appealing or off-putting, depending on where you stand, if they suck, and where we think they're going to go, and more importantly, if they're actually going to enact sustainable, consistent change. So let's start with the one that is very clearly in all of our faces every single day: body positivity. The first time I've ever heard of body positivity, a few years ago, I thought it was an internally focused idea of loving your body, no matter what stage you or it's in. That it was about learning to see yourself as beautiful despite the things you may not like or the things that society tells you you shouldn't like. And that's going to be a reoccurring misconception of mine that's going to keep popping up throughout this video. I thought all of these were internally focused, well, except gym bros. But look at me looking like a dumbass for thinking that people actually wanted to attempt self-improvement. While the consensus is that the body positivity movement was born from the fat rights movement of the late 60s by engineer Bill Fabry, I hope I said that right. Fabry started the fat rights movement after he became outraged on his wife's behalf based on her mistreatment at work due to her weight. He was then inspired to establish the National Association to Aid Fat Americans, or NAAFA, after realizing how prevalent anti-fatness was in the United States. However, it is often swept aside that in the western side of the United States, around the same time, a group of feminists in California started the Fat Underground. Some of these feminists were actually a part originally of the NAAFA. While the NAAFA referred to their movement as fat acceptance, these feminists called it fat liberation, and they were slightly more radical. The Fat Underground actually released the Fat Manifesto, demanding equal rights for fat people in all areas of life, and they consistently called out diet culture. Interestingly enough, both groups had some racial issues. Are we surprised? Fat activists reported that they felt shut out by the voices of marginalized groups, and they thought that marginalized groups didn't really need a voice in fat activism because they thought at the time that the colored folk were more accepting of bigger bodies. Okay. Of course, NAAFA is now an open supporter of movements regarding marginalized groups, including BLM, Stop Asian Hate, and as well as the alphabet enthusiasts. But I wanted to point out the racial setbacks of early fat activism because I always see people spinning this narrative that the movement was based on marginalized bodies, skin color wise. But that's simply not true if you're talking about one of these two originating movements, which are the ones I normally see referenced throughout social media. It's okay for a movement and its supporters to grow and to learn, but don't erase what the truth is. Now, enough of that, because barely any of that actually applies to the current modified version of body positivity we're talking about today. No matter what you say, body positivity blew up because it was commodified on Instagram mainly in 2012. mainly thanks to Tess Holliday. Of course, by 2015, many companies were jumping on the bandwagon in the outrightly performative ways we love to see. I've seen so much discourse around this because commodification in the United States usually means stripping away the visibility of marginalized groups, and body positivity seems to be no exception to that. The main criticisms I often see for this movement is that it's too focused on fatness, not enough attention is put on alleviating the body standards from bodies that are different colors other than white, bodies that are disabled to some capacity, bodies that don stretch marks, moles, hyper or hypopigmentations, wrinkled, weathered skin, etc. For example, I'm a burn victim, not in the way that you will outrightly notice and not on the level as some other people, but to the point where I've covered most of my burn with a tattoo. You can still see some of it peeking out here. And I can't feel most of the skin in that area of my forearm. But the point is I never seen a burn victim in any capacity centered in this movement. And the most prevalent criticism that I've seen of body positivity is what actually spawned the body neutrality movement. Body positivity still focuses heavily on beauty, as in you're beautiful no matter what. So in a way, there's still that caveat of being beautiful to establish your validity. Now, to be honest, I think people are being a little nitpicky here. When most people say love yourself, they're not meaning in the sense of radical body positivity and that you should love yourself, all of yourself, every day, all day. They're normally meaning accept yourself. You are highly valued. You are loved. When you say I'm fat and someone responds with you're beautiful, it's not always because they're outrightly fat phobic. It's because our society has conditioned us to interpret fat to be a negative. And when someone calls themselves fat, it is often a negative connotation. Instead of biting the head off of the person who was just trying to make you feel better, question why you're calling yourself fat in the first place. Since body positivity is actually more of a social movement focused on expanding the ideas of beauty, even though it's currently failing in that realm, there needs to be more cohesion in its purpose. And who speaks for the movement needs to be more than just white women. It should be every color of person imaginable. It should be every body type imaginable, including skinny girls and men. We all suffer from the very limited, always fleeting beauty standards in the West. Stop pretending like our short keens, skinny daddies, and acne-scarred babes aren't suffering in silence. I know we've gotten to this place in our society where it's just the oppression Olympics now, and I do genuinely understand certain groups need more support and a quicker response time than others, but with something as expansive and as inclusive as the body positivity movement could be, for it to still sideline people, there's no excuse. But enough about body positivity. She's always gets the spotlight, even though she has two siblings, fat acceptance and body neutrality. And yes, I am aware fat acceptance has very similar origins to body positivity. Fat acceptance arguably came first, since the organization it spawned from is literally called, National Association to Aid Fat Americans. But I separate the two because the fat acceptance movement does not seem to have the same messaging as its originator or even what the NAAFA stands for today. And if I'm being 100% honest and very critical, I think the only reason the present day fat acceptance movement is even linked to the NAAFA or fat right activists of the 60s is because of the name and the lack of knowledge of the fat liberation movement from California. Fat acceptance today looks exactly like what the women who created the Fat Liberation Manifesto wanted. Fat liberation pushed the rhetorics that many people associate with the fat acceptance movement today. Doctors are the enemy, weight loss is genocide. While the NAAFA was more focused on systematic, on paper changes, for example, though not necessarily tied to the NAAFA, the Bonnie Cook versus Rhode Island legal case win was a big step in the right direction for fat rights activists. Cook versus Rhode Island is a suit where Bonnie Cook sued the state of Rhode Island after being rejected from a position from the state-run disability center based on the sole factor of her weight. Cook was 5'2" and over 350 pounds at the times, so she had a little bit of fluff, but she also had a proven track record of success in the industry and was highly qualified. And because I know people like to go, well, maybe it wasn't actually because of her weight, blah, blah. No, the facility literally said her obesity would limit her activities in the workplace and would stop her from evacuating patients in the case of an emergency. Whether or not you think that that is a valid justification or not for not hiring someone, it's irrelevant. Because based on the language of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, they just discriminated against her because of what they perceived to be a disability. Though obesity was not considered to be a disability at the time, it didn't matter because the potential employers perceived it to be and denied her work because of it. But like I was saying, while the fat rights activists were focused on systematic change, the fat underground was more interested in dismantling fundamental societal values. Though the fat underground had some problematic takes, like calling weight loss surgery barbaric, they first and foremost pushed for human right and recognition for fat people, which shouldn't be a hard ask. This being said, I can wholeheartedly say our present day fat acceptance movement probably really stemmed from the fat underground more so than the NAAFA. People just don't advertise it like that because of their unawareness of this sister movement. Okay, enough history though. Let's discuss the ongoing fat acceptance movement at large today. No pun intended. A lot of the popularized ideas of present day fat activists really grinds people's gears. If you gander through the fat acceptance hashtag on TikTok, you can quickly start to see why. There's multiple narratives and a lot of big brain ideas out there. For example, fat phobia is rooted in racism, and best believe we're gonna get into that nonsense later. And as previously said before, the desire to lose weight or changing your body in any way is fat phobic. There's some ED shaming in the community that I really think goes unaddressed, but simultaneously there's a misrepresentation of not necessarily EDs, but the recovery process of them. And I'm not saying that recovery of an ED is not different from person to person, but we're going to discuss that a little later. And lastly, the desire for the public to change standardized operations to accommodate not just averagely fat people or people who are overweight or slightly obese, but to accommodate extreme obesity. Now, let's dive into these ideas. Let's go easy to hard mode. The desire to lose weight is fat phobic. First, I need to discuss this term fat phobia because I am tired of seeing people say, "That's stupid, I'm not afraid of fat people." The APA defines a phobia as a persistent and irrational fear of a specific situation, object, or activity, which is consequently either stringently avoided or endured with marked distress. Albeit, that's a little dramatic for what we're trying to look at here. However, because definitions in an actual profession often differ from the language that is used by the everyday person, we'll need to pop into the Webster dictionary, see how it's defined there as well. According to Webster, there are two layman definitions of the word phobia. One, an exaggerated fear, and two, an intolerance or aversion. Language is not stagnant and it will change over time. The second definition presented by Webster fits exactly into what people are trying to describe with the term fat phobia. Anyway, the desire to lose weight is said to be fat phobic by some activists because you're attempting to succumb to the societal beauty standards of thinness. And the problem here should be very clear. You shouldn't try to dictate what other people do with their own bodies. I'm sorry, did you expect me to say it's because they're promoting an unhealthy lifestyle? Much like language, we shouldn't expect or require stagnancy from others. If the purpose of fat acceptance is to not only feel valid in your own skin, but change societal's general perception of fat people, we also need to be able to simultaneously internalize the desire to lose weight outside of reasonings of wanting to feel accepted or loved by the society that persecutes you. Misinterpretations of eating disorders. There's a lot of reasons why someone may be fat, overweight, or obese. And while I don't necessarily believe health at every size is true, don't drag me I will discuss that later. Despite the mainstream belief that people are fat because they overeat and are lazy, and despite social media's belief, it's not always because of some hereditary trait. That said, weight gain can be caused by an ED, but little man ditched me. That being said, weight gain could be caused by an ED or the recovery from an ED. And this is something I learned very well myself, not in the sense of actually having an ED, but I will go into that further when I get into Gym Bros. Your body can react in the weirdest ways when you're not doing the things that you need to do to ensure that your body can sustain itself properly. Our bodies are amazing and can adapt to how we're treating them, for better or for worse. EDs and the recovery of them show this. There's so many effects when your body is fighting to get back to homeostasis. Relating this to weight gain, when recovering, you could experience extreme fatigue and energy loss because your body is trying to conserve the amount of calories it's burning. You could experience severe muscle weakness. You could have affected your skeletal system and negatively impacted your bone mass density. And also, you could have metabolic slowdown. All of these effects could lead to weight gain. And that's not to mention that your body is latching onto whatever nutrients comes its way while you're recovering. Now, what I have seen from fat activists online who have suffered from EDs is referencing something called starvation mode. And they talk about it as the reason why they are currently substantially overweight and why they cannot lose the weight. So starvation mode, in the way that TikTok describes it, is what I'm assuming is actually metabolic damage mixed with the theory of adaptive thermogenesis. Metabolic efficiency is the body's ability to use its stores of carbs and fat to varying degrees based on what you're doing at the time. So when you're at rest, your body reduces the amount of energy it releases. When you're doing some kind of insane workout, your body releases more energy. When you undergo an ED, however, you can very easily disrupt this delicate balance. Adaptive thermogenesis refers to the responses our body utilizes as a survival mechanism in response to weight loss. This is what TikTokers are calling starvation mode. However, it's only a theory. Through various overfeeding studies, there has still been no conclusive evidence that this is a thing in humans. When you fuck with your metabolic efficiency, your body can no longer properly regulate its energy output, which is why the studies done for adaptive thermogenesis, participants actually gained weight, not because their bodies are stuck in the state of, oh my God, my body is used to getting a certain amount of food and now it's not getting it and it's going berserk. Now, to be very clear, it has been shown that this can cause you not to lose weight, but not necessarily gain it. There's other factors at play that cause that weight gain. Now, that's not to say there's no validity in it. There's no validity in people's experiences or in the concept that your body will harp you to eat more after experiencing an eating disorder when you're attempting to diet or lose weight. But this normally stops after consistently feeding and nurturing your body. It shouldn't be something that is heavily prevalent after 5, 6, 7 years of your recovery, at least not physiologically. This doesn't account for psychological effects caused by your ED. Now, how does that mean fat activists are misrepresenting EDs? They're inadvertently spreading the message you will never recover from your ED because you'll just get a new one. While it's all right to talk about your experiences and how your body is reacting to conditions that it has previously experienced, it's not fair to others currently struggling with EDs to be told over and over, you're going to be obese if you manage to recover from your bulimia or anorexia, when that simply isn't the case for most people. I know that that's probably not their intent, but intent doesn't always matter if you're causing more harm than good. Fat phobia is rooted in racism. This is such an interesting argument, especially for the white women who keep throwing it out there. If you invalidate fat people, you're a racist. This argument seems to stem from one singular source, Fearing the Black Body and Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings. Now, before I really go into this, I want to put some respect on this author's name. She maintains a PhD and is an associate professor at the University of California. And she is also the proud recipient of the UC Berkeley Chancellor's Postdoctoral Fellowship. The reason I point this out is because of this book. People really clown this woman like she just pulled everything out of her ass, and that's not the case. She is a highly respected, highly educated woman who created a thought piece based on her observations of history and sociological theory. Now, it's a theory I don't agree with, but still. Did I read this book? Nah. But I watched enough interviews to have a basic understanding of her thoughts. Her theory states that the Americans' perspective on weight and fatness is just another systematic enterprise to further subjugate Black and brown bodies. She stemmed her arguments from the basis that fat bodies were revered in the Renaissance era and earlier, but after transatlantic trade went into effect, there was a switch up because fatness was now related to Black people. She also claims that obesity and weight research in general is inherently racist. My thoughts on her theory culminates to there are various of other theories as to why fat phobia is so prominent in the United States. Military propaganda. If you want to feel like a productive member of society, you need to be able to serve your country, and you can't do that while you're fat. Good old toxic masculinity and the male gaze, consistent objectification of women, including the introduction of standardized clothing sizes, fleeting beauty standards that are sometimes adopted from other cultures like France and Italy, who have often revered thinness in their society. You can reference the departure of the corset in fashion, the growing ability for people to even be fat, or the proximity of fatness to your social class. Extra weight was seen as desirable prior to the 1900s because it showed excess, as in you're wealthy enough to eat more than what you actually need to. The opposite of that is now true and widely accepted. If you have enough wealth and time, you are thin, smaller, or have a more fit body. And of course, there's the conversations of the degradation of the food industry and the effects of socioeconomic. No one really wants to dive into how our 5-day work weeks and 8-hour shifts really cut into our time and our energy to consume healthy diets and afford healthy diets, and also put time and invest time into exercising. I don't think Dr. Stream's theory has no value, but I think that there's an amalgamation of things that have occurred to get us to this place, and for this concept to affect white people on the level that it does. I think drilling it down to just a problem revolving around race, specifically Black people, it's not entirely correct. It is reductive at best and erases the experience of everyone else who is not Black, and discourages nuanced, holistic thinking at worst. Forcing societal changes. I consider this the hardest issue with fat acceptance because it's difficult to explain that, one, society will not bend when forced and not presented with enough evidence to justify that change. Society will not change when it views the problems of fat people as a lesser issue because society views the problems of this group of people to be the fault of the individual. And three, a lot of the bans I see are highly unreasonable. I'm not a proponent of thinking that something that affects people on a large scale is just an individual issue. If there is an obesity epidemic in the States, there's more at play than just, oh, you eat too much McDonald's and you're lazy. But to demand for things like airlines changing its seatings for obese people who fall at the far end of the spectrum, to demand for clothing stores, whether small or large, to carry clothing sizes from a size small to a 10XL, despite the profitability of that, I don't know, man, that seems like a bit much. I am not a corporation simp. I'm more so thinking about small and mid-sized businesses. That is a lot of product to stock. And I say that as someone who owns a clothing business. But I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the Gym Bros section. So without further ado, my entire reason for making this video is Gym Bros. And the other body image movements just got lumped in there. So what is a gym bro? A gym bro is a dude, used gender neutrally here, but they're mostly men. He's a dude who lives in the gym. He breathes sweat and pre-workout and snorts protein powder and has the chippering need to tell people why they're fat, or rather why you don't look like the way he does. Gym bros are not a movement, obviously. They're a cult. And they have a lot to do with the spread of misinformation, especially in relation to the body positivity, neutrality, and fat acceptance movements. And I didn't forget about body neutrality, so shut up. Gym bros are the main specimens that have something to say about fatness, particularly fatness in women. The typical bro shouts that everyone can get a fit body if you just stop being lazy and stop making excuses. Get off your asses and stop being fat. I'll calm down. In all seriousness though, fitness trainer culture has really tainted the understanding of the medical science of the human body and societal perceptions of health. The bodies that these gym bros sport is what we are told to be ideal, but while we, to some extent, know that those bodies don't happen overnight, we're not privy to just how much time, money, and energy, along with addiction, contributes to their physiques. And there lies the disconnect. The amount of time put into mating such a body isn't just about the amount of hours they put into the gym. It is hours of planning and carefully preparing food to adhere to strict diets and routines that consist of normally high proteins and low sugars. Fitness trainers and gym bros usually have bodies that are not actually conducive to their natural body type and shape, and therefore are not as easily sustainable as a normal person's healthy disposition. There's been such a big push to see fitness instructors work in partnership with medical physicians because they think medical fitness meets every need, which in reality, it doesn't. Exercise as medicine sounds nice when you're looking at a person like me, maybe someone who is slightly overweight and is looking to decrease the amount of body fat on her body. However, I have the time and resources to do it. And I also have no underlying medical conditions nor a history of mental illness. But when you turn the scope just slightly, fitness trainers would have no clue what to do with a person who suffers from clinical depression. There's a chemical component to mental illnesses that fitness bros love to deny. Or is it simply because they have no awareness or knowledge of it? Well, I think it could be a great idea to integrate fitness plans into the medical profession and for more physicians to collaborate with health clubs. And I am intentionally ignoring the economic and moral ramifications of this for sake of time. But it also isn't the right time for it based on the current scope of fitness trainers. There are virtually no qualifications to being a fitness trainer. Yes, there are 12-week certification courses that go over simplistic applied sciences and nutrition, and there is a degree that you can obtain in sports medicines, but you don't have to. And that's not to say that experience is nothing and education is everything, but your personal experience and success does not account for the success you'll have in overseeing the bodies of others. The most basic requirement to be a trainer is that you need that gym bro body. Why would I take advice from someone who does not understand the human body on a fundamental level that is tangible in their teachings? And they don't even have the same body I have. There are baseline understandings that apply to almost everybody's body, but with personal trainers, you're not looking for baseline. You're looking for a well-constructed, comprehensive plan that suits you, your individual lifestyle, body, and goals. And half the time, you don't get that. There's not a lot of research out there for personal trainers' effectiveness, though the demand for the profession continues to rise. But the few studies that are suggest that one-on-one personal training is effective in changing the attitude towards fitness, which leads then to an increase of physical activity. So you sound like more of a motivational speaker to me rather than a body and fitness expert. But what does this have to do with the body image movements? Well, fitness bros can be kind of vicious. Because the culture in the fitness industry revolves around individualism even more intensely than American society as a whole, they cannot understand a deviation in society for wanting to be more accepting of fat bodies. Like, why would you want a fat body when you could look like this? Their interpretation of these movements is that when people accept their fat means that they will not seek healthy living or weight loss, because weight loss to them, especially for women, is synonymous with health, even though that is not always true. Having extra weight on a body like mine means that I am not healthy to them, even though in actuality I am. I could be healthier and I'm working on it, but my body is currently in a healthy state. Striving for better or for more for the betterment of self is not bad, but making it seem like everyone with a fupa is just going to kill over and die any day by suffocating on their fatness is ridiculous. And again, it just shows their lack of knowledge on different bodies, how they work, and what goes into considering whether or not someone is truly healthy. At the end of the day, fitness trainers are in the business of aesthetics and visual results, not health. You can be falling apart on the inside and damaging your kidneys with all of this creatine as long as those arms don't jiggle. However, on the flip side, health at every size isn't a thing. At least not in the way I see it pushed on social media. Presently, health at every size pushes the idea that health exists on a continuum that varies from time and circumstance for each individual, and that health should not be used to judge or oppress anyone, or used to assess value in an individual. I agree. Now, here's the controversial piece. They also state, pursuing health is not an individual obligation. That's a nah. Even though there are a multitude of societal reasons as to why people are more unhealthy than ever right now, that doesn't mean you still shouldn't try on an individual scale to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Ooh, that twang. To maintain a healthy lifestyle. That aside, gym bros love to make it seem like fat people are just lazy and they overeat. You know, the stereotypes that are often pushed about fat people right now. As we discuss in the fat acceptance portions of this video regarding EDs and their effects, that is not always true, or even true most of the time, I think, for people who are overweight. You know what else could make you overweight? Not eating. Not too long ago, I worked 3 jobs. I worked 2 full-time positions, 1 during the day and 1 overnight. And I also maintained a part-time job that popped up in between those 2 shifts. When did I sleep? Never. The honest answer is in my car between shifts and on breaks. But in all that time spent working, when do you think that I ate? And when did you think I had time to create healthy meals for myself? The answer is I didn't. While I didn't necessarily eat junk food or fast food because despite working so much, I still couldn't afford the fun foods, I just didn't eat frequently. Maybe 1 meal a day and a couple of light snacks. And the meal was usually chicken and rice because it was cheap to make and I could make it in larger portions. Point is, prior to 2021, I worked literally over 20 hours a day, almost every single day, and basically relied on 1 meal to sustain me through all of that. Our bodies can withstand a lot. When you hear that, you probably think, oh my God, you lost so much weight. Nah. In 2019 to 2020, I gained about 30 pounds, putting me at my heaviest weight of around 150 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people until you realize that I'm 4'10". So I was overweight, maybe obese for my stature, and I could feel every single pound. Every time I ate anything, my body just latched onto it and would not let it go because it didn't know the next time it was going to get its fuel. But the point of me telling you this is to get you to understand that weight gain can happen because you have an imbalanced diet, because you're overexerting yourself, because you're not sleeping. There are many reasons why weight gain could happen. Obesity is truly complicated, but gym bros always want to go hard. They always got to go the extra mile. So it's not enough to hate on body positivity and body acceptance. Nay. They hated on body neutrality as well. And with that, we're going to segue into the next chapter. I told you I didn't forget about body neutrality. It's just the weirdest one of them all to me. And this is probably going to be centered just on my thoughts, not backed by any research, because there isn't that much out there about this movement quite yet. Body positivity is like the child that didn't work out, so the parents decided to try again and body neutrality popped out. You know how I said before that body positivity is pretty consistently criticized for focusing too heavily on beauty and appearance? Well, body neutrality was the response to body positivity. Body neutrality, as defined by random people online, is based on the notions of acceptance and having respect for one's body rather than love. Part of the discontent with body positivity is that people think it can dip into toxic positivity when applied to society holistically. Rather than saying, my body is beautiful no matter what, so therefore I am valid, how body positivity does, body neutrality says, I am here, so therefore I am valid. It removes the expectation of beauty or love. Neutrality subscribes to the thought that your body just is, and it is not the most interesting or the most attractive thing about you. Neutrality can be amazing for someone struggling with an ED or recovering from one, as well as for people struggling with body image issues of other types that are starting their body image journeys. It is said that body positivity and body neutrality can exist in the same person, and that just because you're neutral towards your body doesn't mean you should also stop caring for it. Unlike body positivity, fat acceptance, and the cult of the gym bro, this movement does seem to be almost entirely internally focused, because how else would you apply this to society? We could try to push for society to stop viewing beauty as the best thing since sliced bread, but where does that change start if not with ourselves? But for those who want to enact social change, I have some criticism. Who would have guessed? Just like body positivity and fat acceptance, body neutrality is missing one key detail. The perceptions of Black and brown people in the United States goes beyond how big or small our bodies are. On an individual level, I don't think most people would think about their bodies on an everyday basis, at least not regarding health, just beauty-wise, if they weren't told to. If they didn't know that when they stepped out into the world, they were going to be looked at in some type of way, I don't think most people would think about it. Body image issues don't happen in a vacuum. They don't pop out of nowhere. While I may accept my body and even love it on some days, I wouldn't pay attention to it if I didn't know its appearance would influence people's perceptions on me. In my head, when I think about myself, when I imagine myself, I don't see my color, my race, my ethnicity, my body, nothing. I just see who I am rather than what I am. But as a dark-skinned woman, there's very few days where I'm not aware of my body, not because of necessarily my weight, but because of my skin color in conjunction with my body type. I am highly sexualized in a lot of spaces because of that combination. So when you say apply neutrality to a societal scale, only referencing body shapes, you're not doing what you think you're doing. You're effectively advocating for white women, but only scratching the surface of body issues that impact marginalized groups. Even outside of this unattended effect, it is all right for people to seek validation in being hot. Whether that be from others or themselves, as long as they know that it's not the only and most important aspect about themselves. I know there's spots in this movement that brings awareness to other aspects of the body, for example, like trans presentation, but like the other movements, it is overwhelmingly represented by activists who only discuss weight. We've made it to the end, where I'm going to sum up my thoughts of all of these cultural phenomenons. Body positivity has the potential to be great if there was more cohesion and tight-lining in its ethics, and if it expanded to more than just body size and even body color. We've already seen that body positivity has the potential to make great change. It was the driving force behind corporations like Dove and Target to be more purposeful with the diversity in their advertisements. It is important to see all bodies everywhere, not just because they are beautiful, but because everyone deserves to see themselves in everything. Fat acceptance is the most flawed and the most disturbing. None of my thoughts on this movement lie with the argument of you're promoting an unhealthy lifestyle. People can just exist. Even though I think health at every size is widely misunderstood and a low-key sham, which is the basis a lot of fat acceptance activists use. But I did want to make a point that it is okay to say, I'm fat and kind of unhealthy, but I'm still deserving of love and validity, because you are. People should be able to exist in whatever body, healthy or not, and be met with respect. Your health is no one's business but your own. You do not need to try and prove that someone can be healthy at 500 pounds to combat stereotypes, because honey, people never cared about whether or not you're healthy. They just wanted to shame you because of your appearance and your appearance alone. I don't care what the scale says. I will never promote the invalidation of someone for something as shallow as their weight. I love to take part in dismantling fat stereotypes, but not through this movement because it's too misguided. Gym bros, go fuck yourselves. Just kidding. The fitness industry can be very well-meaning at times, but it has a long way to go before society can even begin to accept trainers as valid sources of bodily advice. There needs to be more studies conducted on trainers, and more education should be encouraged to them as well, especially since the demand for them continues to rise. Your success with your body is not enough for me to believe that you are fit to teach. Gym bros and gym heads in particular need to sit down and practice self-awareness and understand that their lifestyles are not desired nor sustainable for the average person. And lastly, body neutrality is not like the other girls and can be a very powerful tool on a personal scale. Applying something like body neutrality to society does not seem feasible to me, nor does it seem desirable based on the current teachings of it. I like to look and feel hot, and whether or not my perceptions on what is and is not hot is based in beauty standards is debatable, but I know that I feel good when I think I look good. Our bodies are more than just vessels to enable us to survive. They're a part of our self-expression. If you made it to the end of this video, good on you. And thank you. I put a lot of work, love, and time into this video because I wanted to come from a place of understanding on all topics, even though I went a little hard on gym bros there, but God, they can be a lot. If you like this video, me, or just appreciate the insanity of putting something like this together, please subscribe to my channel and leave a like. Please drop your ideas for deep dives in the comments below, and until next time, bye!